It requires something that most humans aren't willing to do. It requires being weird in the world. It requires not looking at things quite the way others do, which means it's a good idea to just keep your mouth shut about it. In other words, you don't need to be blabbing all over the place. I see things differently. I see where they're going, not where they are. And I appreciate where they are because that's what carved the path about where they're going. But I'd rather look to where they're going rather than where they are, because there are a lot of people that will criticize you for not being realistic. And we get that too. We don't want you to look at something and call it something different than it is. That makes you and everybody else nuts. We just don't want you to look at the things that you don't want to see. Don't perpetuate it for them or for you. And a lot of people say that's not realistic. The doctors gave him this label, and there's something about him that liked that because he couldn't explain it. And so to be given a label somehow gives you a license to be this abnormality. Labels and diagnoses are snapshots in time that is moving. Snapshots in creation that is becoming. Snapshots in individual and collective evolution. So if you just keep taking the picture, click, 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 click. What are you doing? Facing reality. Click, 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 click. Then you just keep recreating the same thing over and over. It's new. It's just the same, but it's new. It's just the same, but it's new. It's just the same. It's new. You know that 10 pounds you've lost over and over and over and over again? It's like that. Or rather than click, 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 you can feel the discomfort in that. And every now and again, you can get off that subject and on some other subject, maybe through meditation. And you can get a glimpse of something, and you will find a daydream in time. And if the daydream feels good, you could follow it. But what does human nature say? I'm just making that up while my brother has schizophrenia. And your society says, you're not supposed to make things up. Help your schizophrenic brother. And we say, how are you going to help your schizophrenic brother? Click, 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 label, 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 click, 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 label, 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 click, 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 click. Ow, 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 ow. You have options. You have options. And when you really remember that your non-resisted thought is so powerful that it influences things, then everybody's bipolar, because every subject is wanted in the other end of the stick. And we've noticed that those who have really, 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 really strong desires have also an equally really, really strong sensitivity to the absence of it. And in a world that's trying to get you to fix things, it's the most normal thing in your human world to be focused on the end of the stick that you don't want, because humans have convinced each other that the way you fix something that you don't want is by getting after the end of the stick that you don't want. Wrestle it to the ground and kill it. There's a war against drugs, and a war against cancer, and a war against AIDS, and a war against teenage pregnancy, and a war against, 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 and every one of those things is getting bigger, because there's no such thing as no in an attraction-based, inclusion-based universe. It doesn't go away. But in the meantime, look what's going on. The well-being is so much more pervasive. How can you not notice that? Just the 2 factors, the 3 factors, the 4 factors. Your earth spins in its orbit in perfect proximity to other planets. That's a big deal. You hardly ever talk about it. And if it were not happening, you'd be talking about it, trying to fix it. The sun comes up and warms you. This perfect creation that you got way out ahead of before you got here. It's so wonderful. When you go to bed at night, your heart takes care of the blood flow in your body, and you never talk about it. How's it going? Oh, it's going really good. The sun came up again this morning. And people would look at you like, are you crazy? Why would you be focusing on that? Because it matters a lot. How's it going? The earth spinning in perfect proximity to other planets. What's wrong with you? Well, I just thought I'd point out something really significantly good that's going on in my life. It's so significantly good. In fact, if things were showing up in your life experience, let's say you're watching television. Let's say you're not, but let's say you're watching television. Esther does. And let's say you're watching television and there is a perfect representation of well-being versus things that are going wrong. So you're watching television and it looks like this day looks outside. Feels like, smells like, it's well-being, like this is the bigness of all of this. So you're watching that on television and it's just pleasurable. Oh, it's so pleasant what you're watching. It's just beautiful and harmony and delicious and interesting and provocative, and you're just watching and you're just eating it up. And then across the screen goes zip. And you say, what was that? And a wise person who understands the proportionality of the planet said, oh, that was all the bad things that happened on the planet today. Zip. In comparison with all that other programming of well-being. And yet humans, because you're oriented to finding the thing that's wrong and using your practicality to wrestle it to the ground, so you pinch yourself off from the resources because you've forgotten that there are some steps. Step one is you see it and you feel it and it impacts you and you don't want it, but in that brief moment you know what you do want, and you launch through your telepathic vibrational ability to launch. You launch a request, you launch a determination, and the energy that creates worlds, your inner being and source, take that information and focus upon it completely. And that's why your earth spins in its orbit in perfect proximity to other planets, and on 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 and on. So step one and step two just happened. Step three is you meditate, you bask, you appreciate, you find reasons to feel good, you get into the receiving mode, and you daydream, and you witness the thoughts turning to things. You witness the evidence of universal forces and the well-being flowing through the creative energy of your ability to focus your mind, and you witness and feel the inspiration to move through and act and be a part of it. That's step three. And step four is you do that, you do that, you do that. You're so good at that. You're reveling in it so much that you're afraid you're going to fall out of the sky. You're loving it so much that the idea of not doing that is unbelievably unbelievable. You just can't even bear the thought of not continuing to be this creative genius that you were born to be and that you are. And then step five is something that you saw coming and you didn't change your thought. You just acknowledged it and tried to compensate with your action. And then it kept coming and it kept coming and it kept coming, and it got right up really close to you. And instead of saying, oh yeah, I saw that coming, this is all for my good, this is part of the questions that I've been asking, this is part of what I want to know about being the creator, this rascal in my life is there to assist me in really getting control of my own resources, in really finding the power of my own mind, in rediscovering again and again the power of collective consciousness, and the power of being one with my inner being, and the power of worthiness, and the power of well-being. That's what this is all about. This isn't about punishment or badness, me or them. This isn't about things going wrong, like falling out of the sky or the earth not spinning in its orbit. It's not about any of that. This is about me getting clear about how this works, which is what I was born to be and do and experience. And so it's all so good. It's all so good. That's step five, appreciating the contrast for what it means, because without it, I could not have launched that rocket of desire. Without the contrast, which I think I don't want, there could be no expansion and no evolution, which there must be, because that's what eternity is. We continue to be, which means we have to continue to decide. And once we've decided, we must continue to focus upon what we've decided. And if we don't focus upon what we've decided, future generations will live it, but we could too. We could focus on what we've decided if we could trust the power of our ability to decide. If we could believe that we are worthy enough to decide, that we were put here to decide, that deciding is what we do, and that we get to choose, and that the choices are many, and that we can feel when we choose what the source within us is choosing. Life is supposed to be fun. We are supposed to be satisfied and fulfilled. And when someone isn't, they get schizophrenic. When someone isn't, they get bipolar. In other words, when things are not going the way you innately know they should be, you go a little nuts. And we understand that. But it doesn't mean that things have gone permanently wrong. It just means that in this moment, you've got some split energy, and you can get really good at doing something about that, can't you? You can get really good at doing something about that. You could get out ahead of it by meditating, and then not very much would go wonky in this day. You could get out ahead of it by deciding to daydream. You could not be out ahead of it, feel something go a little off, and do what you said. You could pivot. You could give your attention to something that you prefer instead. You can mold the clay. You can get as far away from your connection as you want. You will always come back to it. You will always come back to it. You will never really fall out of the sky. You will never leave the fullness of who you are. The eternal nature of who you are is yours eternally, you see. Oh, but we like it when you say, I like life so much, I cannot bear the idea of not being here. Not because I'm afraid to not be here, but because I like being here so much. We're really enjoying this conversation. Much more clarity to come. You are contributing through your thoughts. Do you know that? Can you feel the conversation evolving in response to who you are and what you want? This is a really good time. In fact, it's over time for